there's some similarity to Little Women. How much of a remix are you trying to do? Is it just a passing similarity, or are you trying to do some form of retelling?
So, yeah, so I initially was imagining it to be much more of a retelling than it ended up being. I originally thought maybe it would be more of a young adult book, and the characters would be a little bit older and closer to the age of the girls in Little Women. And I think Jo March is 16 when the book begins. But Little Women is just this massive book, and it spans many years of these girls' lives. And once I actually sat down to try to, outline and write, I wrote, I think, the first 5 chapters, and I just didn't feel right to me. And I think part of me didn't want to mess with the classic also, because I'm a purist, and I love that book so much, and to the point where, people would talk about their different favorite film adaptations, and I hated all of them until the most recent.
Most recent with Meryl Streep and Bob Odenkirk?
The most recent I actually loved. Yeah.
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't know if I just was being more generous because I had done a read inspired by. No, I actually really loved it. I thought it was so well done. But I think maybe that fear of also offending a Little Women fan and making them, question my intentions or why I chose certain things was in the back of my mind. But I think more than anything, it was about the voice. And as I was writing, it just something wasn't clicking, and I decided to age it down to middle grade. And in doing so, the story changed drastically. But what I ended up doing was take my favorite aspects of the book I love so much. So some of the themes, some of the, the personalities of the main characters, the relationships, and some major events too. And then I wove it into this completely new story. So it's definitely not a retelling. It's inspired by, but people who love Little Women have come back and told me that some don't realize it right away. So I don't tell people until, well, people know if they've, listened to your podcast, for example, but I don't,
well,
I don't
said
put
the
up
book's
with
description.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, but on the
book
jacket, it doesn't actually say, does it? Well, maybe in the praise or the blurbs it does, but in the actual, description of the book, we don't mention it.
Oh, okay.
So, and I know, like, marketing.
This whole section out, forget it.
Yeah. So, I totally lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I'm so sorry.
Oh, we were talking about not feeling that you didn't want to tick off Little Women fans by doing a one-to-one.
Yeah. So I think what I ended up doing is what people who tell me sometimes when they read the book that they thought something felt familiar, but they didn't realize what it was at first. And then all of a sudden they catch on and they're like, oh, I see what you're doing here, but it's not immediately obvious to them. And some people who maybe read Little Women many, many years ago don't see it at all. And others look for it, and then they find these little Easter eggs, and they're like, oh, I see how you reinterpreted that moment or that scene. I also didn't let myself pick up the book, the classic, and I have an old copy that belonged to my sister, actually, that I used to read over and over again. And I didn't read it once I decided I was going to write this book. And I really wanted to rely on memory. And I mean, I read the book so many times, I have a pretty good memory of it, but I wanted to pick the scenes and the things that stuck out the most to me, or were significant to me in some way. So I really consider the book a sort of love letter to my favorite book in a way, and something that was just so special and part of my growing up. And actually, to what we were speaking about earlier in terms of representation or the lack thereof in my life, I think I really adored Little Women and didn't really think about why until more recently. And I thought, what was it about this book that I love so much? And I think in a weird way, I could relate to this family and these girls who were growing up in, the time of the Civil War, in a way that I didn't always relate to my peers, even at school, or, my contemporary peers, because as a child of immigrants, I was negotiating a different life, and my parents had different rules sometimes than my friends. Like, you can't go for sleepovers, people we don't know, or, things like that. And, when it came to dating or other things, they had these very different rules. And I felt like the March sisters were living in a different society and like different gendered rules and just, what society dictated. And I think I really identify with Joe, like so many people do, trying to push back against what was sort of decided for her and what her life should look like. And I thought maybe that was why I just could relate to these girls in a way that maybe even more contemporary fiction, or even, like I said, my friends in real life sometimes. So it was very comforting to me. And that's why I thought, maybe this would lend itself well to a initially I thought, Pakistani-American retelling, because some of the traditions, even even the idea of a marriage proposal, I mean, we still have that where it's sort of, old fashioned, but it could be, set up or have families involved, and it'd be more of a, group proposal setting and things like that. So, I thought that could be fun to explore.
I've talked about this on other podcasts, so I won't belabor the point, but I think there's still some wisdom in that. I chose my own spouse. We're very happy together, but we are the exception to the rule. I know so many people that have chosen their own spouse. That was a terrible idea. Somebody should have stepped in and made a better choice for you.
That's awesome.